He had always been careful. Life had taught him that the world could be unforgiving, that trust was a fragile thing, and that every risk had a cost. He measured his steps, weighed his words, and rarely allowed anyone too close. But from the moment he saw her, something inside him shifted. She wasn't just beautiful, she carried an intensity, a kind of fire that made him both nervous and irresistibly drawn to her. It was in the way her eyes lingered on details, the subtle curve of her smile, the laugh that could light up the dimmest room. He felt both exposed and curious, and for the first time in years, the familiar walls he had built around himself seemed inadequate. They met by chance at an art gallery. The muted hum of visitors and soft lighting created an intimate cocoon, but it was her presence that dominated the space for him. She stood before a sculpture, twisting and reaching upward like a flame frozen in time. He found himself staring at the piece, not for the art itself, but for the reflection of her in it, the way the light caught her hair, the tilt of her head as she examined the curves and angles. She noticed him then, of course. How could she not? There was an awkward tension in the air as their eyes met, and he felt his pulse spike. She didn't flinch, instead, she smiled, slow and knowing, as if she had been expecting him all along. "You seem careful," she said, her voice a soft melody that somehow carried through the quiet room. He chuckled nervously, unsure how to respond. "I guess I am," he admitted. "Life, it's taught me to be." Her eyes softened. There was no judgment, only curiosity and an unexpected warmth. "Then maybe it's time to risk it again," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Carefully, slowly, but with everything you've got." Her words lingered in his mind long after they parted that evening. There was something in her confidence, the way she spoke without pretense, that invited him to take a leap he wasn't sure he was ready for. He went home that night feeling a strange mixture of exhilaration and anxiety. The walls around his heart were beginning to crack, and he could feel the pull of something dangerous yet undeniably alluring. Their next meeting was arranged casually over a text, but it felt monumental to him. He found himself overthinking every detail, what to wear, what to say, how to not seem too eager or too distant. When he arrived at the small cafe where they had agreed to meet, she was already there, sipping a coffee with a calmness that only heightened his nerves. She looked up and smiled, that same slow, knowing smile that seemed to disarm him every time. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. Conversations flowed easily, touching on childhood memories, failed ambitions, secret fears, and little quirks they never shared with anyone else. With each story he told, she listened intently, never interrupting, her presence a steady anchor in the storm of his scattered thoughts. He realized that he hadn't spoken like this with anyone in years, and the sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating. It was during one of those conversations that he found himself confessing the fear that had haunted him since he was young, that he would never truly be enough for someone else, that his hesitations and insecurities would always hold him back. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his, and he felt a jolt of electricity shoot through him. "Then maybe you just haven't found the right person to take it slowly with," she said, her smile gentle but teasing. "Someone who doesn't rush you or judge you. Someone who wants to understand every part of you, even the parts you're scared to show." He couldn't help but laugh, partly out of relief and partly because he realized how much he wanted to believe her. It was the first time in years that he felt seen, truly seen, and it shook him in ways he wasn't prepared for. The first night they spent together was a delicate dance between desire and caution. He had feared intimacy for so long, worried that his lack of experience or confidence would ruin everything. But her patience and quiet confidence gave him the courage to let go, to trust, and to explore the depths of connection he had never allowed himself before. "Take your time," she whispered, her lips brushing his ear. "I want to remember this forever." Those words stayed with him. It wasn't just about physicality, it was about trust, vulnerability, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. And for the first time, he realized that intimacy could be something beautiful, something that built bonds rather than left scars. As the weeks passed, they discovered that building a relationship was not without its challenges. He struggled with letting go of control, while she sometimes feared being too vulnerable. Arguments emerged, moments of silence stretched longer than they should, and insecurities occasionally threatened to dismantle the fragile connection they were nurturing. But every challenge became a lesson in communication and patience. They learned to speak their truths, even when it was uncomfortable, and to meet each other with empathy instead of defensiveness. Through late-night conversations, shared secrets, and small, deliberate gestures of care, they began to weave a bond that was stronger than fear or doubt. He learned that true connection required courage, not the kind that comes from heroics, but the quiet bravery of being open, honest, and fully present. She taught him that vulnerability was not weakness, it was a gateway to profound intimacy and trust. By the end of the first chapter of their story, they had built more than passion, they had built understanding. Every touch, every word, every shared moment became a thread in a tapestry of trust and affection. He still hesitated at times, still felt the old fears creeping in, but he also began to see the beauty in surrendering to the experience, in allowing himself to be fully seen and fully loved. And though the journey ahead was uncertain, he knew that this patient, deliberate connection, was unlike anything he had ever known. It was a love worth the risk, worth the fear, worth every careful step and every lingering glance. Months passed, and the rhythm of their lives had settled into a pattern that felt both exhilarating and comforting. Every morning brought the soft hum of anticipation, every evening a quiet joy in shared company. He had never experienced love like this before, love that was patient, unhurried, and daring all at once. She became his anchor, grounding him when life's chaos threatened to sweep him away, and simultaneously his storm, challenging him to confront fears he had long buried. He felt a clarity he had never known, the kind of clarity that only comes when someone truly sees you and refuses to let you hide. One evening, they found themselves in a quiet apartment overlooking the city lights. The sky was a deep indigo, dotted with stars and the faint glow of distant street lamps. They sat close together on the couch, her head resting against his shoulder. He had been silent for a while, thoughts swirling like restless currents in his mind. Finally, he whispered, "I don't know if I can ever truly match you. You're so much, and I'm just me." She turned to him, brushing her fingers through his hair, a gesture so tender it made his chest tighten. "It's not about matching me," she said softly. "It's about being with me. Fully, honestly, without holding back. That's what makes it unforgettable." Her words struck him deeply. For years, he had measured himself against impossible standards, fearing he would never be enough. But in her presence, he realized that love wasn't about perfection, it was about showing up, day after day, with courage and authenticity. She had taught him that vulnerability was not a flaw but a strength, and that true intimacy could flourish only when both hearts were unguarded. As days turned into weeks, their connection deepened. Every touch, every glance, every whispered word carried layers of meaning. They laughed until their sides ached, cried in each other's arms over past regrets, and celebrated the small victories that life handed them. There were moments when the world seemed to vanish, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of shared understanding. But love, as they quickly learned, was never without its trials. Life threw challenges their way, unexpected work demands, family tensions, and personal insecurities that resurfaced at the worst moments. There were arguments that left them both questioning whether they were strong enough to weather the storm. There were nights filled with tears, silence, and the heavy weight of uncertainty. Yet, every obstacle became an opportunity for growth. They learned to communicate in ways they never had before, to listen even when they disagreed, and to forgive when mistakes were made. Through the turbulence, their bond strengthened, proving that love was not simply about passion, but resilience, patience, and empathy. The ultimate test came when circumstances forced them apart for several months. Distance, the kind that gnawed at the edges of even the strongest relationships, threatened to undo all they had built. Video calls replaced physical presence, letters replaced spontaneous touches, and the quiet ache of longing became a constant companion. At times, the miles felt insurmountable, and old fears crept in, insecurities that whispered doubts, questioning whether they could survive the separation. But they persevered. They wrote late into the night, sending words that were more than just messages, they were lifelines. They shared dreams and fears, whispered reassurances, and promised that distance could not diminish the love they had cultivated. Slowly, the separation became a lesson in trust and patience. He learned that love was not measured by proximity alone but by commitment, dedication, and the willingness to nurture the connection even when it was inconvenient or difficult. When they finally reunited, the world seemed to pause. He remembered the first time he had looked into her eyes, the way she had challenged him to be brave, and now he saw the growth in both of them reflected in that same gaze. Their embrace was long and deliberate, a reconnection that carried all the weight of absence and the joy of rediscovery. Every kiss, every touch was intentional, a reminder that time apart had not weakened their bond but had deepened it in ways they could never have imagined. It was in those moments that he truly understood what she had meant when she first whispered, "Take your time, fill me slowly, so I'll never forget you." The too big he had once feared wasn't a limitation, it was an opportunity to learn patience, to explore depth, and to leave a lasting imprint on each other's hearts. The journey had not been easy, but every hesitation, every uncertainty, every fear had led them to a love that was extraordinary, unforgettable, and transformative. He marveled at the way they had grown together, how challenges that had once seemed insurmountable had become stepping stones toward a stronger bond. She had taught him that love was an art, not a race, that it required care, attention, and a willingness to embrace every nuance of another person. In turn, he had shown her that vulnerability could be met with courage and consistency, proving that trust was not fragile when nurtured with intention. They spent hours talking about their future, dreaming together in ways they had once been too afraid to imagine. He realized that love was not about possession or control, it was about presence. It was about giving fully without expecting perfection, about honoring each other's complexities, and about creating memories that would linger long after the moments themselves had passed. Every shared glance, every quiet conversation, every tender touch became a testament to the power of patience, understanding, and unwavering commitment. As the night deepened, they lay together in silence, the city lights casting soft shadows across the room. He felt a profound gratitude that he had taken the risk, that he had allowed himself to be seen, and that he had chosen to trust. In her arms, he understood that the greatest love stories are not the ones that rush past in a blur of intensity but the ones that unfold deliberately, with intention, care, and respect. In that quiet intimacy, he realized something crucial. Love is not about how quickly it ignites, but how deeply it burns. It is about taking the time to understand, to cherish, and to grow together. The too big moments, the fears, the hesitations, they are all part of the journey. And when navigated with patience and courage, they transform into a love that is not only unforgettable but enduring. As dawn approached, they remained entwined, hearts beating in quiet harmony. The journey they had embarked upon was far from over, but they had discovered a truth that would guide them through every challenge ahead, that love, when approached with patience, vulnerability, and courage, becomes a force that shapes lives, strengthens souls, and leaves an imprint that lasts forever. And in that realization, he smiled. The fire she carried had not consumed him, it had awakened him. And as he held her close, he knew that together, they could face anything, grow through anything, and create a love story that neither time nor distance could ever erase.